Welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, the podcast that peeks into the secret life of your cells and tells you what they've been whispering about behind your back. I'm Ethan Foster, your trusty observer of all things odd and ordinary.
And I'm Alara Skye, your comedic detective and nutrition sleuth, popping out jokes faster than your stomach can say fiber deficiency. Today, we're diving into a lovely little subject that's sure to spice up any dinner table conversation: colon polyps.
Because, obviously, who doesn't want to talk about suspicious bumps on the inside of your colon?
Right? Nothing says appetizing like a reminder that your colon might be sprouting miniature speed bumps. Now, before anyone starts squirming too much, let's clarify. Many colon polyps are harmless, but some can turn into big trouble if left unattended.
Precisely. Let's get started with a quick overview, shall we? Picture your colon like a garden hose, except, biologically attached. Polyps are those small bumps on the inside of that hose, and while they might not all be lethal, you really don't want them to overstay their welcome.
Exactly. And I love this garden hose analogy, by the way. If you have a giant backyard, you don't want random lumps clogging up your hose, preventing your prized roses, or, in this case, your bodily waste, from flowing freely.
Indeed, no one wants to run out in the yard midsummer and face lumps in the hose. That's a classic Sunday frustration. In colonic terms, we're talking about blockages that can lead to bigger issues.
Let's talk about symptoms, or the lack thereof. Because a lot of people assume that if something's wrong in their colon, they'll know right away. But guess what? Colon polyps often like to stay invisible, especially when they're small.
It's like having a stealthy house guest who never does the dishes but also never announces their presence. You don't know they're there until you notice something's missing, or, in this case, until something's changing in your bathroom routine.
Precisely. Sometimes people notice changes in bowel habits, like constipation that sticks around longer than an unwelcome cousin or diarrhea that refuses to exit stage left.
If I regularly read the newspaper on the porcelain throne and suddenly find myself stuck there longer than usual, that might be a sign.
Indeed. Or if you can't seem to stay off the throne because, there's a stampede instead. Either extreme could be telling you something about those hidden bumps.
Then there's the ever-awkward symptom of rectal bleeding. As fun as that topic is for dinner conversation, it's worth mentioning.
Right. If you see bright red or darker, terry matter where it shouldn't be, that's basically your colon waving a little red flag. It could be something else, but it might be polyps. Don't ignore it.
Another possibility: abdominal discomfort, cramps, or bloating. Like that feeling after a triple cheese pizza marathon, except you didn't just eat one. Large polyps can create partial blockages, building up pressure behind them.
If you're feeling suspicious little pangs that linger, it might be time to investigate. Although, please don't use that as a reason to stop triple cheese pizza altogether, unless your body really hates it. Then we can talk about a deeper logic.
Now, onto risk factors. Some are about as escapable as turning 40 or 50. Age is a biggie. Once you cross into your late 40s or 50s, your chances of polyps ramp up dramatically.
Exactly. Statistics show that these adenomas, basically your run-of-the-mill polyps, pop up more often the older we get. By age 45, maybe 20% of folks have them, and it just keeps climbing until half of us at 85 are hosting them.
So basically, if you needed another reason to feel anxious about getting older, you now have one. But wait, there's more. Genetics.
Familial adenomatous polyposis. That's a mouthful and not a new exotic dessert. It's a hereditary condition where people develop tons of colon polyps due to a mutation in their APC gene.
Yes, the dreaded APC gene. That means if your family tree includes a robust collection of early colon cancer cases, there could be a strong genetic link.
But there's also the lifestyle angle, which brings us to the topics of diet, exercise, and toxins. Eating too much processed meat, for instance, is linked to polyp formation.
Our old friend, the processed hot dog. Always a crowd pleaser, but not exactly colon-friendly, especially if overcooked and loaded with heterocyclic amines. That's a real mouthful in more ways than one.
And we can't forget inflammation. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis revolve around chronic inflammation, which promotes polyp formation like a teacher handing out extra candy at Halloween.
Now, the next logical step is to talk about gut health. Our colon is home to trillions of microorganisms. They're basically a bustling city inside of us.
Exactly. And if that city is out of whack, it's called dysbiosis. When the beneficial bacteria pack up and the rowdy troublemakers move in, you end up with an environment that fosters everything from polyps to bigger problems like colorectal cancer.
Essentially, your gut is a party, but if the wrong crowd takes over, things get ugly. The key is to keep your city well balanced. One major way is to focus on fiber, plants, whole grains, vegetables, all of that good stuff that your gut bacteria adore.
Yes, though there's a catch. If your gut's already compromised, jumping straight into a high-fiber diet can backfire. It's kind of like forcing an entire marching band into a small living room. Too many performers, not enough space, potential chaos.
Precisely. That's why if your gut is in really bad shape, focusing on easily digestible carbs, like sipping on dextrose water for a short while, might help settle things before introducing heavier fiber.
And then slowly reintroduce starchy items like white rice, maybe whole fruits. And once that's all cool, you can graduate to your veggie parade.
Right? The idea is you're rebuilding beneficial bacteria and letting your colon readjust. Eventually, it can handle that glorious fiber abundance.
Also, we can't overlook the role of healthy carbohydrates for fueling those cells. Glucose is your cell's top choice for quick energy. It's like the premium gasoline for those mitochondria.
Yes, though of course we want to stick with sources that don't sabotage the gut environment, because if we fill ourselves with refined sugar or processed junk, we're basically giving an open invitation to the bacterial troublemakers.
Precisely. And speaking of sabotage, let's talk about seed oils. Now, these are typically loaded with linoleic acid, La, which your gut does not appreciate. It's been described as a mitochondrial poison that messes with your colon's environment.
So basically, seed oils are that friend who shows up to your house uninvited, wrecks the furniture, and leaves. Not good.
Exactly. So it's recommended to keep La intake below 5 grams a day, or even below 2 if you want to be an overachiever. The best way to monitor that is to log your meals in an online tracker. It's tedious, but worth it for an accurate picture.
Then it becomes quite obvious that those handfuls of nuts, seeds, or that extra drizzle of generic vegetable oil quickly rack up La. Also keep an eye on chicken and pork, because they're often high in La if the animals were fed certain grains.
That's why switching to grass-fed butter, tallow, or ghee can help. These healthier fats avoid the high La content, supporting a better environment for your mitochondria and your gut overall.
Now for the big question, to scope or not to scope. Colonoscopy is touted as the gold standard in colon cancer screening. They take a camera, look around, and remove polyps if they see them.
But it's also invasive. There's a small risk of serious complications, including death, though rare. Some stats suggest a death rate of about 3 per 100,000. Serious adverse events might be 44 in 10,000. So it's not a trip to the local carnival.
The dreaded colonoscopy prep, chugging that laxative that empties you out so thoroughly, you wonder if you'll ever leave the bathroom again. That flush can also mess with your gut microbiome, ironically.
Indeed. And if the colonoscope isn't sterilized meticulously, there's a risk of picking up something from a previous patient. That's why the choice of sterilization method matters. Ask if they're using peracetic acid to disinfect.
Right? That's basically vinegar on steroids, dissolving any microbial proteins on the endoscope. You want that to happen thoroughly, otherwise it's like reusing a straw after someone else just had the flu.
Also, colonoscopy isn't the only screening method. There's the fecal occult blood test, GFOBT, the fecal immunochemical test, FIT, and the stool DNA test combining FIT with a check for altered DNA. Some folks prefer CT colonography or a flexible sigmoidoscopy. Each has pros and cons.
It's just unfortunate that many doctors only mention colonoscopies and don't elaborate on these other methods. In an ideal world, they'd say, here are all the screening options. Let's find the best fit for you.
Exactly. But until that utopia arrives, it's on each of us to ask questions, weigh the pros and cons, and figure out the best approach to keep our colon safe.
Now, let's pivot to how we can protect our colon. We've mentioned diet a bunch, avoiding processed foods, focusing on unprocessed whole items, going easy on the seed oils, maybe limiting or cutting them out entirely, and then regularly exercising. That's a key trifecta.
Absolutely. Exercise is like the best plumber for your body. Keeps things moving, reduces inflammation, and helps maintain a healthy weight. Excess weight can contribute to all kinds of problems, including polyp formation.
We also have to consider other stressors that can harm our cellular energy production. Synthetic endocrine disruptors, estrogen overload, electromagnetic fields. Like, we're living in a giant invisible spiderweb of signals that might irritate our cells if the exposure is high enough.
Exactly. These factors chip away at our mitochondria's ability to power our body effectively. When cells are starved for energy, the colon can't maintain the right environment for beneficial bacteria.
Now that beneficial bacterium we keep hearing about is Akkermansia. It's like the VIP doorman of your gut, helping maintain a healthy gut lining and balancing the microbiome.
But there's a catch. You don't want to supplement Akkermansia if your environment is still a toxic swamp of seed oils, because those mitochondria are still limping. Give yourself at least 6 months off seed oils to recover function, then consider adding Akkermansia.
So the logic is, first, stop the daily sabotage. Then, once your body's somewhat stable, bring in the reinforcements. Otherwise, the reinforcements won't stand a chance.
Exactly. And when you do go for Akkermansia supplementation, look for timed release or microencapsulated versions. The trick is to get those living bacteria intact to your colon. If they're destroyed by stomach acid, they won't do you any good.
Another gut microbe killer, antibiotics. Yes, they're sometimes necessary, but they can also flatten your beneficial bacteria, which obviously leaves your colon more vulnerable to unwelcome intruders.
Right. So only take them when absolutely needed. And if you do, follow up with a plan to rebuild your gut flora, through fermented foods, or with the help of a structured reintroduction of healthy carbs, etc.
On top of that, Watch out for antibiotic residues in conventionally raised meat. Better to opt for ethically raised, antibiotic-free options so you're not inadvertently dosing yourself with microbial warfare.
Precisely. That's another step in forging that healthy environment. When you do all these little steps, avoid seed oils, limit processed junk, choose good proteins, keep LA low, get enough fiber once your gut can handle it, you're making your colon a fortress against polyp formation.
And that fortress approach is exactly what we want for the long game, so polyps don't sneak in and decide to settle down permanently.
Absolutely. So that's it for this episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. We've taken a comedic stroll through the colon, but hopefully you're leaving with some practical insights.
In comedic style, it's kind of weird to say a comedic stroll through the colon, but I guess that's exactly what we did. And hopefully it wasn't too rough of a ride. We appreciate everyone tuning in.
Absolutely. If you're going to share colon polyp facts at a dinner party, make sure you bring the punchline too. Because sometimes you need that comedic relief after all this talk of lumps, blockages, and stealthy bleeders.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Ethan Foster, reminding you that even though your body can be complicated, taking steps to care for it doesn't have to be rocket science. Just skip the seed oils, watch out for suspicious lumps in the hose, and feed those gut microbes with some good fiber when you're ready.
And I'm Alara Sky, encouraging you to keep that colon rolling in tip-top shape. Because a healthy gut means a happier you, and a comedic spark that never runs dry. Until next time, thanks for listening to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom.
Well, since we're still here, might as well dive a little deeper. Some folks might be itching to know more about the finer points of polyp formation, because who doesn't want extra details on that?
Right, continuing the conversation. Let's talk about adenomatous polyps. These are the type more likely to turn cancerous over time. They tend to be the ones doctors really want to nab during a colonoscopy.
And if you're genetically predisposed, you might develop them earlier or in greater numbers. That's where knowledge really is power. Knowing your family history can help you stay on top of screenings before something dire happens.
Exactly. And for those who missed it, if you have a strong family history or a known condition like familial adenomatous polyposis, it's wise to keep an eye out sooner than later. Sometimes doctors advise earlier or more frequent screenings.
Then there are hyperplastic polyps, which are generally less risky. These are more common in the distal colon and typically pose a lower chance of turning malignant, but it's still good to keep an eye on them.
True, because a polyp is a polyp. If it's hanging out too long, you just never know if it'll morph over time. Better to be on the safe side.
Agreed. Now, we also mentioned how certain diets might feed those inflammatory processes. Processed meats like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, they produce certain compounds when cooked at high temperatures.
Yes, heterocyclic amines. They sound like something from a space travel documentary, but they're created when muscle meats are cooked under high heat. Studies suggest these compounds can damage DNA in colon cells.
It's like making your colon cells run a gauntlet with flaming arrows, not a scenario you want.
Precisely. Meanwhile, let's emphasize that the colon loves short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs, that come from fermenting fiber. SCFAs help keep inflammation down and support that protective mucus layer in the gut.
That's why a consistent moderate fiber intake is beneficial, once your gut can handle it. The SCFAs keep the colonic environment calm and reduce the risk that polyps decide to take root.
And let's not forget about that scenario where someone's gut is severely compromised. If you have major dysbiosis, introducing a bunch of raw vegetables overnight is like throwing a rager at a venue with zero security.
Right? Chaos ensues. Instead, you ease in with simpler carbs, gradually progress to more complex fiber, so your gut bacteria can adapt.
Meanwhile, you're also eliminating the daily offenders, processed sugar, seed oils, giving your mitochondria a break, because LA is known to hamper them. And if your mitochondria can't produce enough energy, your cells suffer.
Next step, after your gut is more balanced, might be to incorporate some targeted fermented foods. Although, if you're still a seed oil devotee, it's like planting roses in toxic soil. They won't survive.
Exactly. So you do the ground clearing first, then you bring in the beneficial microbes. And that's how your internal environment shifts from being polyp-friendly to polyp-resistant.
Also a good point about exercise. Many people think, oh, it's just for heart health or weight loss. But it also helps keep the colon more active. The movement fosters better elimination, so you're not letting waste linger.
A colon on the move is a happy colon, you might say. That alone can reduce polyp risk in the long run. And with weight control, you're reducing overall inflammation, which is another polyp promoter.
Let's talk more about the synergy between environmental toxins and our cells. If you're overloaded with synthetic chemicals, your liver and kidneys are working overtime, and your cells are under stress. That stress can hamper the gut's resilience.
Absolutely. Then add electromagnetic fields from all our devices. Some research suggests that these fields might compromise mitochondrial function too. It's still an evolving area of science, but it's worth paying attention to.
Because if those mitochondria are acting like tired factory workers who haven't slept in days, you're not going to maintain that low oxygen environment for good bacteria like Akkermansia.
Correct. So yes, before you pop an Akkermansia pill, get rid of seed oils for at least 6 months, dial down your LA consumption, and maybe watch your exposure to other environmental stressors. Then your colon is more prepared for these beneficial bacteria to flourish.
Right? Nothing's worse than paying good money for fancy bacteria, only to have them wiped out by an unfriendly environment. It's like inviting VIP guests to a party that has no food or lighting. They'll leave immediately.
Then, once those beneficial bacteria find a welcoming environment, they help maintain the gut lining, lower inflammation, and keep your colon environment optimal, potentially warding off polyp development.
That's the hope indeed. Now, about antibiotics. We can't demonize them altogether because they save lives in the right situations. But if you use them for every sniffle, you risk flattening your beneficial gut microbes.
Precisely. Which then sets the stage for nastier bacteria to move in, and that fosters more chronic inflammation. And then we circle right back to that environment that encourages polyps.
If you do have to take antibiotics, consider reintroducing beneficial microbes afterward, whether through targeted probiotic supplementation or naturally fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, whatever works for your palate and your gut.
Exactly. And for meat, if you can find high-quality, pasture-raised options with no antibiotics, that's another step in the right direction. Every little choice adds up.
So this entire conversation is basically a tapestry of small choices that, when woven together, create a protective environment in your colon. And ironically, it's not rocket science. It's basic. Eat real foods, limit toxins, and let your gut flourish.
Indeed. And while we might joke about it, the colon is a critical organ. It's the final checkpoint in our digestive process, absorbing water, vitamins, and balancing electrolytes. We should keep it in peak condition.
Absolutely. So many health issues can be traced back to imbalances in the gut. Taking steps to keep that environment healthy might also improve your mood, energy levels, and overall well-being.
And if your colon is misbehaving, you might see it in your skin, your immune system, or your energy. So it's not just about avoiding polyps, it's about thriving in general.
Well said. Now, for those wondering about how often they should do these screenings, that depends on personal risk factors. Some folks might do them every decade starting at 50, or earlier if their risk is higher. Others might choose a non-invasive test more frequently.
Yes, and that's where you weigh your personal factors, genetics, lifestyle, any unusual symptoms, personal comfort with invasive procedures, and so on. Then decide whether colonoscopy, FIT, or the stool DNA test is your best route.
And don't be shy about asking your doctor how they sterilize the scope if you go that route. If they stare blankly, maybe consider a different facility. This is your colon we're talking about. You don't want to pick up a second-hand problem.
Exactly. No one wants a used colonoscope fiasco. Sometimes you've just got to be that person who politely but firmly says, "Walk me through your cleaning procedures. Better safe than sorry."
So, to wrap up again, avoid the stealthy polyp situation by staying informed. Know the signs of potential polyp trouble, consider your personal risks, and cultivate a gut environment that's less welcoming to these unwanted squatters.
Keep LA low, processed foods out, good carbs in, fiber up, but gradually if you're compromised, and exercise. That's your trifecta, plus being aware of screening when appropriate.
Precisely. The big picture is about synergy, putting together many smaller lifestyle pieces that collectively keep your colon's garden hose free of lumps.
As always, if something feels off, investigate. Don't brush it aside. Early detection of polyps can prevent bigger headaches down the road.
Or bigger stomach aches, to be precise.
Well played, Ethan. Well played. And with that, we should probably let our listeners return to their day, possibly with a newfound appreciation for what's happening inside their large intestine.
Indeed. So ends another episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. We hope you leave with more knowledge, and maybe just a hint of comedic perspective on a topic that's serious, but doesn't have to be fearsome.
I'm Alara Sky, reminding you that your cells have a story to tell, so feed them well, protect them from toxins, and they'll pay you back with vitality and comedic brilliance. Well, maybe the comedic brilliance is optional.
And I'm Ethan Foster. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, remember, the only lumps in your life should be in your mashed potatoes, not in your colon. Stay healthy, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom.